So I just want to do a brief intro about the NALS show, because we're here because the North American Lily Society is being hosted by the Victoria Lily Society for their annual convention, show and symposium. And that's the show that I'm sure you've all been through. And that's the reason that we're here. So here's the NALS. They're a great organization, and if you do have an interest in lilies, for sure you should join the Victoria Lily Society, and then beyond that, the North American Lily Society. And I've got some websites and stuff at the end of the talk. It's a nice small crowd, so it's probably best to keep it very casual, and if you have a question, just shout it out, okay, and I'll stop and answer it with them. Okay? So it's probably going to be shorter than 60 minutes, so don't get scared. But basically, it takes quite a while, as you can see from the showroom, to go through all the different types of lilies. There's many different types, and probably some of you are surprised that there is so many different types of lilies. So I'm going to go through that and just help you put it in context, what's what. And then a little bit about how to obtain lilies, and then how to prepare and plant them. And finally, a little bit about how to propagate, because most gardeners want to learn how to get plants for free. And propagation, that's the way you do it. So first off, we're talking about true lilies, the genus Lilium. So it's a scaly bulb is the persistent part of the plant. It's a geophyte. It lives underground. But every spring it will send up a single shoot out of that bulb and make quite a large stem and sometimes quite a dramatic, as you can see in the showroom, inflorescence of flowers. And that's all 1 year's growth from that bulb. What's most important for that flower, for that stem and flower, the inflorescence, is the stem roots coming off of the stem above the bulb and below the surface of the ground. So you can see in this picture, the laser pointer doesn't work on the TV. So you can see in this picture, this is the critical part for nourishing your lily. These roots are important, but this is the critical part in terms of the roots that are going to feed this annual growth of stem and flower.
Is the depth of that variable depending on the subject?
Most of the time, the general rule is you want to plant the bulb 3 times its depth below the surface of the ground. So, and generally that means 6 inches down. And that's why you plant lilies so deep. It's not because you need to protect the bulb in our climate. It's because you need to have lots of stem roots to feed the plant for that year's growth. So that's a very important point to remember and to think about. And that's a real key feature of true lilies, of genus Lilium. So we're not talking about daylilies or temeracalis, that's a completely different thing. Or any of the other many plants in Liliaceae or with lily in their common name. Some of these plants aren't even in Liliaceae, but they're somehow a lily because they're a pretty flower, I guess. I'm not exactly sure why. Lilies are all in the northern hemisphere. They're usually in temperate climates. There are, even the ones that grow in the Philippines or in India are up in high country where it's a more temperate climate. There's a large number of species in North America. People don't realize that. You think of lilies maybe come from Asia or China, maybe from Europe, but there's actually a large number of species in North America. So there is a classification that the North American Lily Society came up with way back, decades ago. And that's what I'm going to go through in terms of helping you understand the range of the number of kinds of lilies. There's Asiatic lilies. Well, we'll go through this one by one, but that's the overview of what we're going to go through here in terms of understanding what lilies are. So the Asiatic hybrids, they come in divisions. A means up-facing, B means the flower is out-facing, and C means the flower is down-facing. Generally, Asiatic hybrids do not have a scent. Sometimes it'll be a very light scent, but it's very subtle, and most of them don't have any scent. And they're usually very bright, clear colors, and they're as thousands and thousands of hybrids. Some of the species that are involved in the parentage of the hybrids include like Lilium in the top left, Bulbiferum in the top right, Davidii in the lower left, and Wilsoni. That's probably not correct taxonomically, Steve, but
No.
anyway.
Okay.
Here's just a couple of pictures of some of the type of hybrids that you might find. Landini's kind of an old lily now, and yellow electric you probably won't see in the Lilium catalog anymore. But and here's this. The Dutch might sell a bulb like this one as an orange tiger, which means
Yeah, orange.
they don't know what it is
Oh.
anymore. And that's one of the common pollinators of lilies is the swallowtail butterfly. Asiatics, this is Eurydice and red velvet, and red velvet did very well for me this year in the show, and were for sale actually in the Lily Club sale. And even Eurydice was a winner for me back in the past. So the Martigons are generally colder climate type lily. You'll see them even across Siberia, and they grow super well in Alberta. Dr. Evans in the back corner has a huge number of Martigons in the show, and they're quite a dramatic flower, and they're super popular here as well. They grow well in shade and have many, many flowers on a tall stem. So there's not many species involved in the hybrids of Martigons. Lilium martigon itself is quite a variable species, Hanseni, Megadilloides, and Cinquens, but they're a nice lily, especially for a shady spot in the forest or on the forest margin.
So most like sun, is that right?
Most lilies like sun. Full sun, the greater the number of hours of sunlight you have, the better. But Martigons, not so much, and some of the West Coast North American species, maybe not so much. They're more adapted to forest or open forest conditions. So here's some of the species. Martigon itself is a kind of pinkish color. There are many variants of that, including very dark ones and a white form, but in general, it's a pinkish color. Hanseni is yellow, Cinquens is orange and up-facing. And so by interbreeding these and crossing them, you can get many different types of hybrids. And it's quite extensive, actually. So this is in my garden last year.
Oh,
there it is, the swallowtail
Is
again.
it a zebra or a colored or so?
With Yayan Evans, unnamed Martigon.
Wow.
The third division is called Lilium candidum hybrids, and that's the Madonna lily. It's probably one of the plants that's been in cultivation the longest in history. It's a Mediterranean plant and goes back to biblical times, the records of it. In this division, there are some other much less common lilies like Monodelphum, and you can cross those, but because Monodelphum is so unusual and rarely seen certainly you don't see it in commercial trade, you don't really see these hybrids very commonly because even candidum is hard to get in the commercial trade. So yes, there are hybrids in this division, but you hardly ever see them. This was a cross between another Mediterranean lily, Chalcedonicum, with candidum, and this was one of the first documented hybrid lilies was Testacea. It was a naturally occurring hybrid in the Mediterranean. So the American hybrids, there are a lot of lilies in the eastern part of North America, but they're not used much in hybridizing programs. You don't see many hybrids from those. Most of the hybrids come from the West Coast species, and those include Belandrii, Humboldtii, Calagii, Perrii, and especially Pardalinum. And you'll see on the show table, in the awards table, Lilium Pardalinum, that's one of the most common and easily available West Coast species that you can get, and also one of the easiest ones to grow. They're generally hard to find. You pretty much have to be a member of the Victoria Lily Society if you want to get these lilies, or be prepared to grow them from seed. And there are seed exchanges, both through NALS and the Royal Horse Society Lily Group have seed exchanges. So that is a good way to get lilies, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. These are hybrids from a fellow named Harry Hill, and this was a bouquet from the show in 2008 here. He had these hybrids in the show at that time. And unfortunately, Harry has decided to give up on breeding West Coast lilies, so we don't have these anymore. But there we are. But you can see there's quite a good range of colors and forms. So that's part of line in my garden, and it is a really good, reliable West Coast lily, and a great one to start with if you want to get into these guys. Here's I just had a painting of Perryi. And then that Columbianum on the upper right is along Old West Sandwich Road. At the end of June, mid-June to end of June, if you drive along Old West Sandwich Road, about halfway between Oldfield Road and the new West Sandwich Road, on the roadside you will see Lilium Columbianum in bloom.
Just naturalized?
Yeah, it's just growing naturally.
And it's a native?
It is native. It's got the furthest north distribution of any of the, in North America, of any of the North American lilies. And so, yeah, and it's actually got a very wide distribution. It goes quite far south as well. And then in the bottom is Kalagii, which is the only one with that, well, one of the few with that pink coloration.
Wow, that's good.
I noticed just some of them have dots and some don't. Little
Yeah,
speckles.
most do have some spotting, but Perryi, the picture sort of accentuates it. It's often, you don't really see much spots in the, and Perryi is called the lemon lily. It's very sweetly scented. Another one that I don't have a picture here is Washingtonianum that grows on Mount, not Rainier, but near Portland, that mountain down there.
Hood?
Anyway, that's where Washingtonianum grows in large amounts, and it's also scented, right? So these are some of those Harry Hill hybrids, which I wish I still had. I never had the bulbs, but I did have the pollen, and it didn't quite come through for me. So there we are. Longiflorum hybrid, so this is the Easter lily, Lilium longiflorum. And within that division, there's very few other similar lilies. There is one, Formosanum, and you can cross those and get Formlongi hybrids. But the way the Easter lily has been used is mostly an interdivisional hybrid. So I'm going through each division. And you can cross easily within the division. If you start crossing between divisions, then it's much more complicated. And that's one of the last sections here. So anyways, longiflorum is being used mostly in interdivisional crosses, not within the division. And then the trumpets and Aurelian hybrids. So there's some magnificent trumpet stems out in the hall as well. And mostly those species are Leucanthum, Rogale, Sargentii, sulphurum, and I've bolded Lilium henryi because it looks very different. This is the typical Rogale or trumpet species. And there's Sargentii and Leucanthum centifolium. So they're tall, very fragrant, not toxic, sort of spicy fragrant like the Orientals are, but a real sweet, pleasant fragrance. They're usually quite heavily substanced, and in my garden where there's a bit more shade, they sometimes need staking because they will get a little bit floppy as they reach for the sun. In full sun, however, they are great and can be quite strong-stemmed and upright. So henryi is included in the trumpet division because it easily crosses with the trumpets. You get hybrids between henryi and all of those trumpet-formed flowers. So even though it's tightly reflex and looks more like a martagon or a West Coast species, it's actually in the trumpet group because of its ease of crossing with the other trumpets. And when you cross them, you get the Aurelian hybrids. And they often will have these papillae or raised bumps on the petals and color highlights and a flatter, more bowl-shaped kind of flower. This is a black-heart Aurelian where the pigment in the center of the nectary has some red pigment overlaying the green, which gives that black color. And some of us find that very appealing and are spending a lot of time dabbing pollen trying to make more of these. That would be me. If you make a plant tetraploid, it becomes much more vigorous, much thicker substance, much stronger, much more impressive in terms of its stature. And this is a tetraploid Aurelian from Gordon Wallace, who was sort of the granddad of the Victoria Lily Society. He formed the Victoria Lily Society back in the 80s, and this is one of his hybrids. So then we're to the Orientals, which are those very spicy, fragrant, flat-flowered, often with papillae and kind of warty structure. And there are, again, very few species, Japanese or Eastern Chinese species. And only speciosum is found outside of Japan. So this is speciosum rubrum on the left and Lilium auratum on the right. And stargazer is kind of the classic Oriental lily. This is the result of some pretty complex breeding by Leslie Woodruff through the 50s and 60s, but it's got basically speciosum, auratum, and then a couple of other Oriental species in its heritage. And all of these flowers are pretty dramatic, and they're usually very strongly scented. Some people will actually get a headache from the flower. So they're not great inside, but out in the garden it's usually fine. You know, it's kind of wafting by, so it's not making you sick. And now we're to the interdivisional hybrids, and this is what Lilium has really changed over the last 30 years. If you can cross trumpet lily with an oriental lily, you get an increased level of vigor because of that interdivisional cross, and you get a whole range of forms of plants and flowers that didn't exist before. So the flowers will often look like orientals, but have the stature and the stick-with-itness of a trumpet. And often, in order to get an OT hybrid or an oriental trumpet hybrid, you have to make a tetraploid plant in order to cross them between divisions. So that tetraploidy, which means it has double the normal number of chromosomes, that results in a much more vigorous, stronger plant as well. So you have two advantages from these interdivisional hybrids.
So those OTs, when you do those hybridizations, just naturally double their genetic
It varies
material.
quite a bit. Sometimes they end up
Just like-
triploids,
Okay.
sometimes they end up aneuploids. It's not guaranteed exactly what you're going to get, because when you're mixing double the normal set of chromosomes, sometimes errors occur.
Yeah.
And sometimes there isn't fertility, and sometimes the seed doesn't form properly, and so they won't be normal, put it in the ground and plant the seed and it grows. You have to do a fancy technique called embryo rescue, where you actually take the embryo out of the seed and put it in tissue culture in order to grow the plant. And interestingly, sometimes when you do that, the plant you grow will then be fertile and make a normal seed that you can plant in the ground.
Wow.
So it's a little bit of sort of cutting edge science, and there's a lot of stuff that wasn't really known when this happened, and still probably isn't completely crystal clear in terms of how it works. But the end result is undeniable, that they are very impressive plants.
Because one of the observations was clones or display. I mean, so-
Okay, so maybe we should just
Do you want-
clarify
I'm
that.
sorry, I'm
Yeah,
doing-
no, I think that's reasonable to do.
Okay.
A clone is an identical copy of an original plant.
Right.
So if you vegetatively propagate a plant from a cutting, or in this case from a scale, or from tissue culture of the bulb, that's a clone of the original plant. And many of the plants in commercial trade are clones. The Dutch are really geared up with tissue culture, and so if it's making it into commercial trade from Holland, it's probably tissue culture, okay? And so it's a clone.
Okay.
If you grow from seed, then you can cross like parents back again and again and again, multiple times, so that the seed comes true and looks the same every time you plant a seed from that plant, it will look the same as the parent plant. That's a strain. Okay, it's not a clone, it's not identical, but it looks pretty close to the same. And some of the trumpets out there, the Golden Splendor and African Queen, those are strains, they're not clones. Okay. With most of the interdivisional hybrids, because it requires tissue culture to get the original plant, most of the time they're clones. Okay, so this is the parents of a very prominent OT. In fact, the Best in Show winner out there, the stem called Leslie Woodruff, is a cross between White Henryi on the left and Black Beauty on the right. Interestingly, both of these plants were bred in the 50s by a fellow named Leslie Woodruff, and in California. And this was the progeny. This cross was made by Bob Griesbach in the eastern U.S. and it has remained a pretty dramatic and robust plant. And you can see it's a very big, statuesque. Keeps coming back every year. It's like cast iron. They're really strong plants.
So you wouldn't know which color you're going to get.
This is a clone. This is always going to be the same.
But I mean the two that were.
Oh, from the parents?
Yes.
No, you don't necessarily know. It's a bit of a rolling the dice. Yeah. And in order to make this cross, both of these plants, or certainly the Black Beauty, is sterile in its diploid form. So we had to convert them to tetraploid forms, and that's a little bit beyond this talk. But you can make these plants tetraploid. And then, when you cross them, you can get a few seeds. He didn't get a lot of seeds from the seed pod. He got, I think, 5 or 6 seedlings he got from that cross. And he selected one. And that one is Leslie Woodruff. And that was then, propagated through cloning of some type or other to give us all the Leslie Woodruffs that we have in the trade now. So here are some more of these OTs, and they're very dramatic lilies, and they're very reliable. They keep coming back, which is nice. Sometimes lilies kind of fade after a little bit of time. OTs tend to be very strong and long-lived. And this was bred through a complex breeding program by a fellow named Dick Bissett in Kelowna. He lived in Kelowna. He was an Ag Canada guy, but his hobby was breeding lilies. And he bred pink jazz in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And it's a spectacular lily. It's not in commercial trade, so you have to know somebody to get it.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit in commercial trade through Wilbert's nursery, but it's a pretty special lily. Then, in a similar way, that longiflorum, the Easter lily, was crossed with the Asiatics, and that gave the LA hybrids. And these are often triploid, not tetraploid, but same idea. They're more robust, they're stronger, they're thicker substance, and it just gives a better quality of plant that can persist better. And then there's also longiflorum oriental crosses and longiflorum trumpet crosses. Again, we're very fortunate to have in our audience today Wilbert Ronald, who bred Easter Morn and Ivory Bells. And so, and Lynn Collicott actually lives in Sidney now. So, yeah, we've got some pretty famous people right around this.
What is she today? Did you invite her?
She came yesterday briefly.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, Lynn has some health issues that she's, and here's another pretty dramatic Oriental Asiatic interdivisional cross. So the Dutch are now intercrossing multiple across many divisions, often with longiflorum, but also Ziba is a Nepalese crossed Oriental. Nepalese is a pretty uncommon species that grows in the Himalayas. Night Riders and Asiatic cross a trumpet. So the world is wide open now with interdivisional crosses, and it's made the lily world much bigger, and much more opportunity for different forms and colors and types and so on.
Yeah.
So the last division in the classification scheme is the species, and there are some beautiful species. There's about 120 species of lilies around the world. Sometimes we have lumpers and splitters in taxonomy, so sometimes species will have 5 subspecies, and then another person would say, oh no, there's 6 species, not one species with 5 subspecies.
Yeah.
Anyway, but roughly there's 120 species around the world. Lilium grayi is from the eastern US. This is Lilium columbianum up above Kootenay Lake, up above Kelso at Kootenay Lake. Really nice, robust stem of it. Much different than our local Lilium columbianum, which is much wispier and not as tough looking. And then Pardalinum and Regale, these are in my garden. There's Nepalence. Cernuum is a tiny little one. So they come in many, many varieties of species, and that's a whole nother world to grow species. You pretty much want to be growing them from seed. They're very hard to move as bulbs. They're better to grow from seed in situ in your garden where you're going to grow them. And there are some that are, like Lilium regale, for instance, is very easy to grow from seed. So, so how do you get these into your garden? So I'll just give you a few thoughts on how to buy them, things you should do, and then planting them and propagating them. So the Victoria Lily Society does do a bulb order every fall. You have to be a member to order bulbs. Local nurseries and suppliers always get lily bulbs in the spring. They're one of the first things to come in for the summer bulbs after the winter break. And that's a reasonable place to get them. My red velvet on the show table came from Elk Lake Nursery 2 years ago. So regional nurseries, bigger ones like say Ginter or over Phoenix Perennials over in the mainland. There are some more. And then mail order suppliers, primarily from the prairies, Ontario and the US. We don't really have any big suppliers in BC. You can go to the North American Lily Society website, and they have a list of all the commercial suppliers there.
Just a question, if you buy locally, in the spring, are you buying bulbs or are you buying products?
Bulbs, yeah, bulbs.
You're buying bulbs.
Yeah, and what happens is the Dutch package them and ship them, in January or February, and they come in February, March into the nurseries. And you're better to buy them earlier than later. You can get them half off once the lily is growing out of the bag and stuff. But those universally do poorly. So I would not recommend it. You're not saving anything. You're throwing your money away to buy them. So you're much better to buy them before they can have a sprout. They can have the shoot showing. But if they started to grow out of the bag, forget it. We tend to plant in the fall here, but actually you can plant in the spring. In our environment, it's not frozen solid, so you can dig. If you're happy to go in the garden and dig in February and March, you can plant when you buy them in March, right? That's quite reasonable to do. If you plant them in the fall, they'll tend to be a little bit earlier. They'll bloom a bit earlier, and the later you plant them, the later they'll bloom. Right? This is Scheherazade. So for planting lilies, there's really 3 rules. Okay, number 1 is drainage, number 2 is drainage, and number 3 is drainage. If you don't have well-drained soil, they will rot, especially in our climate where we have so much heavy winter rain. And if you don't have it freely drained away from the bulb, it will die. It will rot. So that's very important to do, and so you have to do whatever you have to do. Raised beds or under drains or however you need to do it. You need to make sure that bulb is not going to be sitting in saturated soil all winter. You could put a cover over them even. That's a possibility.
And grow them in pots.
Yeah, pots is another
Grow
option.
them under your eaves in the winter, which
Yeah,
causes a lot.
yeah, I do that a lot as well. That's right there. Yeah. Yeah, and they do actually adapt to pots quite well. The bigger the pot, better, because the roots like it and bulbs like to be cool. So if it's too small a pot, one, those stem roots can't really get going. The more soil they have to get going and feed the plant better. And the hotter it will get if it's in a small pot. They do like humus. They're heavy feeders. That huge stalk and inflorescence that grows in one season requires food to grow. It's not all coming from the bulb. It's coming from those stem roots. So you do need to feed them. And I find humus is really an important aspect of it. They do like sandy soil, but you have to dig in lots of compost for them to feed on. And you can use whatever sort of humus you like. You know, it's your choice how you want to do that. The rule is plant in groups of 3. That way you have to buy more bulbs. And everybody knows we need more plants, right? It just looks aesthetically a little more pleasing. And this is where the depth comes in, and that's about the stem roots, right? You want to have those stem roots. You do want to maintain the fleshy contractile roots at the base. That they do provide nutrients, and they also help position the bulb in the soil. They will actually contract and pull the bulb down if the bulb wants to go deeper.
What's that one close to the surface?
Okay, so that's Lilium candidum, the Madonna lily.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the few. I think there's a couple of other species that like to be a bit shallower, but candidum, it wants its nose just because it doesn't make stem roots.
Oh.
Wants it just below the surface. You don't need to aggressively water, but if you do water, they'll be happier than if you don't. They're actually pretty drought tolerant. I'm surprised. I have a pretty dry garden, and but I got irrigation this year, and they're actually doing a lot better. So, you know, I think you have. It's a balance. You know, they like some water, but they don't have to be aggressively watered. In general, fertilizing is probably a good idea for us, just because, especially if you're growing them in sandy soil where the nitrogen washes away and heavy rains in the winter. They do like to have cool roots, but you don't want them competing for sunlight or for air circulation. So you have to be careful what you grow with them. You know, the smaller hardy geraniums or euchras or stuff like that that's kind of lower and will shade the soil but not crowd the plant.
So, sorry, Colin, I have a lot of clay, and amended, of course, is what you mentioned. And the fertilizer, since they bloom once,
Yes.
is a slow release fertilizer silly?
No slow release. I like slow release because you only have to do it once and then it's done. Yeah, and generally I just apply it as the shoots are emerging, and that's usually enough. Yeah. And that's to feed next year's bulb, right?
Right, okay.
So the bulb will get bigger. I mean, it will feed this year's plant
Right.
if you apply it when the shoot is just emerging through those stem roots. But it also will ensure enough food to enlarge the bulb and make a better shoot next year.
So highest potassium, highest in the potassium phosphorus
Yeah,
range, or
probably
similar all across?
No,
NPK?
sort of like 5, 10, 10, that kind of
10 is
idea.
it? Okay.
Maybe 5, 10, 15, 5, 15, 10, you know. like
So
that.
the numbers are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium?
Yeah. And nitrogen is for growth. If you have too high in nitrogen, you do need nitrogen, but if you have too high in nitrogen, they'll tend to get a bit leggy and a bit floppy, a bit soft.
What sort of fertilizer do you say? What?
What brand?
Yeah, but what are they?
A slow release, yeah.
Yeah, slow release and micronutrients. Gotta have copper in your fertilizer. Always falling asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, micronutrients are good here, again, for the same reason, because of, especially with sandy soils, they'll tend to leach out. Yeah.
Yeah, Colin, it's probably worth mentioning that you can just use like traditional rose fertilizer. So if you fertilize your roses in the summer, that'll be
or tomato
fine.
fertilizer.
Almost all the commercial and Miracle Grow in 2020 all contain micronutrients. You read the labeling.
Yeah.
With the boron, manganese, copper, zinc,
Yeah.
trace amounts.
I'm not a big fertilizer guy, but these guys know.
They know, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question about the fertilizer?
Yeah.
Is there any point in putting it in at this time of the year? Just mine are just about to flower, it's coming up.
Yeah, if they haven't been fed at all, it's not unreasonable, yeah. Yeah, because they'll be growing until September, right?
They'll feed in December, it's a bit cold.
Too late.
No, you put fertilizer any time, and in the fall it's going to get washed out or
Yeah.
broken down there. So usually the time is, February, March, April, when the plants are growing up and can use it.
Just as they're emerging is probably the best. It would be a total waste to do it now, but it's not going to be as advantageous. This is Conquidor. Okay, they do have problems. There is a possibility of things happening. And our climate, botrytis can be a problem, especially if you have one of those cold, wet springs. And especially if you're like me, have crowded too many lilies in too small a space, because you just have to have more lilies. And so they like it to be a little bit more open and airy to let the wind through and keep the leaves dry, and that helps prevent botrytis. Bulb rot certainly can happen, and we were told earlier this week about fungal diseases having a big impact, and typically those will thrive in saturated soils, so you have to be careful about that. Sucking insects, aphids do like lilies, and viral diseases are spread by sucking insects, so it's not unreasonable to spray with soap or whatever system you use to keep aphids at bay. And lily beetle. So we have the lily beetle in Canada. It was imported from Europe. It's in Alberta in spades. It's being documented in Seattle. I think there's a documented case in Kelowna. So it's probably coming. We're hoping that the parasitic wasp that is part of its normal ecology in Europe, has been imported to North America and is taking off. So we're hoping that will be enough to combat the beetle, but you do have to be aware. It's a bright red beetle, it's easy to see, but the larvae are small and they cover themselves with their own excrement. And so they're pretty gross to squish on the leaves, but there you are. I'm not going to go into great detail, but just to be aware, it's coming. The lily.
Colin, was there in your display, was there a virus induced?
There was. Lily, color-breaking virus, yeah.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, there's a number of different viruses that will infect lilies,
Okay.
and just like tulips,
Yeah.
which is in Liliaceae, in the family Liliaceae, they will cross genus, cross
Cause
genera.
genetic changes?
And cause those changes, it causes changes in the epidermis of the flower, and you get that color break. That's just a feature of the viral infection. And viruses will tend to weaken plants. They tend to make them not as robust, not as large, and often distorted flowers, and may weaken them to the point that they're susceptible to other diseases that they may not have succumbed from without the virus, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. This is Leslie Woodruff, and that might be pink perfection in a funny way, or maybe. Okay, so propagation, how to get free lilies. Asiatics will tend to increase quite quickly. They make on these stem roots, underground stems, where the stem roots are coming out, they'll make little bulblets at the nodes of those stem roots. And so you can get multiple bulblets from a single bulb in a season. And then those bulblets will grow quite quickly over a year or two into a flowering plant. So all you need to do is just dig up the clump and divide out the bulbs, and you tripled your lily count. In some bulbs, some of the West Coast hybrids show a knife here cutting the rhizome off. So that would be a little bit more specialized. And then the bulbs themselves will divide. So just through growth, it gets so big, and then it will actually form a split in the basal plate where the roots come out of the bulb, and it will turn into two bulbs instead of one. So there's the bulblets underground coming off where the roots are, and then some forms of lilies will have bulbils, which are above ground in the leaf axils. They make a little tiny bulb, and from that you can grow a clone of the parent plant. It will be identical genetically to the parent plant. All of these methods give you an identical lily to the parent plant. They're clones. So there's, well, here you can see the stem roots. And there's last year's stem with roots. And there's a bulblet on the, coming off of the stem, the underground stem. And here's bulbils in the leaf axils. So you can form little bulblets by taking a scale off of the main bulb of your lily and incubating it in warm, moist conditions in the dark. And at the base where the scales come off the basal plate of the bulb, you will get little bulblets forming. After 6 weeks, maybe 3 months, you put those in the fridge to give them a cold snap for 3 months, and then you plant them, and they will form a clone again of that mother bulb.
Yeah, Colin?
Yeah.
This is a bit like growing garlic, if any of you
I've seen that in garlic.
put seed garlic
Yeah.
in. This is how you put in one clove, and then,
They divide up.
9 months later, you get a head of garlic. And that's propagating by the same kind of process.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a little bit longer in the leaves, but. And then pollen dabbing. This is really easy to do because lily sex parts are big, they're
Big.
giant.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to pull a pollen anther off of one flower and dab it onto the stigma of another flower. It will make seed, and then you sow that seed and you've got a hybrid between those two plants.
I see you mark them with little tags.
Yeah, if you're very careful. So here's a close-up. You can see the anthers with the fluffy pollen ready to go, and that stigma, the female part of the flower, ready to receive the pollen. So yeah, you can be very, ideally you would be very, systematic about it and write down your crosses. But some of us are a little more haphazard. We just dab pollen, and if it grows, it grows, and then we see what we get. So you can be pretty loose about it too. There's no rules.
Yeah.
You can do it however you want to do it, and it's very easy.
And you just plant the seeds like you would in any other seed?
Okay, so you wait, the seed capsule will dry. If it's, not every cross will work. If you've got wide crosses between divisions, this probably won't work. But within a division, within Asiatics, or within trumpets, or within Orientals, this will almost certainly work. And you get a seed pod with seeds in it. There's some dry seeds out of a seed packet in the top right. And then you can plant them in pots, or nowadays I'm just planting in the ground in March. And up they come. And then I have one seedling out there that in 18 months, I had 2 trumpet flowers off a seedling from planting in the ground in April.
Covered with a little bit of soil?
Yeah, they're fairly big seeds, but they're kind of flat. So
Pretend
not
they're
much.
pretend they're carrots.
Pretend they're carrots.
Pretend they're carrots. Yeah, that's good advice actually. Yeah. Just a little bit of soil over top, not much.
Wow.
Yeah, see? Up they come, just like carrots. That's it.
Oh, and that's great.
Here's some of the resources. It's pretty easy to figure out, but
Yeah.
both the RHS and the North American Lily Society have great websites, and you can get information there. And we have a website as well, the Victoria Lily Society, and we have a nice sort of smallish group of people. We meet monthly, most months, and have speakers and do outings and stuff like that. So, yeah. Oh yeah, and for suppliers, Lily Nook in Manitoba is great. They have an online catalog. You can order online. Their shipping is great. So if you want to get a bit unusual or different things that you don't find in the nursery, Lily Nook is a great place to go for that. And Lily Garden in Washington, they're having issues with shipping with phytos and stuff over the border. So that may be harder for you to get, but there you go. Yes, ma'am?
Colin, I didn't have a chance to see if we have any potted lilies still available for sale here outside.
Oh, yeah, there was lilies for sale outside. There may be a few left.
Yeah, I didn't check before I came.
In fact, I think there was quite a few Lilium speciosum, which is actually a very easy species to grow. It's the latest flowering of all of them, so you'll have lily flowers in September here. And that's the latest of all of the lilies for us here. So you can they'll start blooming in June and go right through to September. If you have different varieties, you know.
And they're only $8 per pot, for 1 gallon pot.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, Colin, I could also add that if somebody likes these sort of Western American hybrids, you know, that are a little finicky perhaps or difficult to get hold of, there is a cultivar called Fusion, which is a cross between sort of an Easter lily and this Powderlinum, this orange sort of leopard lily, as some people sometimes call it. But Fusion is quite common from the bulb catalogues and things like this. And so if you want to keep that sort of West Coast vibe going, but you're sort of feeling a bit, well, you know, I can't, you know, source some of these really sort of
You're
slightly rare ones. Fusion is a really sort of good place to start.
Yeah,
What's
excellent
the
point.
cross between? The cross between?
It's a cross between the Easter lily,
Longiflora.
longiflorum, and Powderlinum, which is sometimes called the leopard lily. I think, although there are probably several leopard lilies, but it's that sort of orange and red dotty one that Colin showed. But that's quite common in catalogues, and it works very well in this area.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
And there was some out for sale, there was bulbs of that in the sale.
Was there Fusion out there?
Yes, there was.
Oh, I think they're gone now.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is the Victoria Lily Society bulb sale in the fall, you know.
Applications with your Colin that you pass out. Do you have to apply online, or how do you do it?
You just write me at my email.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do have the form online as well.
Yeah, there's a form online.
Print it and then
Yeah.
mail it, and there's instructions on the bottom of the form, who and how to mail it to. Cash or check? Cash or check.
Any other questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
There's sort of wild, these I talk of it as wild growing in the roadside.
Yes, Canadense probably. Lilium Canadense. Is it kind of a sort of funnel shaped and often yellow and orange, yellow and red, orange, yeah. Yeah, that would probably be Lilium Canadense. If it was, do you remember gray eye that I showed the picture of it, the species? So it has that form, but a different color. And often a dozen or 2 dozen, yeah. I just want to say that we're going to have another speaker in just 15 minutes. Barry Agar is going to speak to us about stalwarts in the perennial garden. So I hope you all stay for that.
Well, I can go see the exhibit again. I know a little bit more than I did when I was in July.